What if the highway knows your name, and the rumble in your tires is not the road at all, but something that woke up beneath it and has been pacing your rig since the first time you drove alone at night? Welcome back to Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. From a mile marker that moves after you pass it, to a CB channel that answers from outside the map, to a way station that clocks trucks which never stop, every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold. I'll keep you close, but listen for your own heartbeat. If it starts syncing with the wipers, that is when the road begins to listen back. From eerie voices that bleed through dead radios to deliveries that arrive sealed but not silent, these tales braid into a single dark ribbon pulled tight across America after midnight. Which story creeped you out the most? Tell me in the comments, and let's see whose theory matches the clues. Story 1. The mile marker that shifted every night, the mile marker pulsed once under my headlights, a green metal heartbeat in the fog, and I swear the number on it blinked like an eye before settling back to 347, as if nothing had learned my name yet. Night driving has a sound if you let it in. Tires humming like a low choir, the engine breathing under your feet, CB static fizzing soft as moth wings. Out here the air smells like cold diesel and old rain. The Nebraska grass goes flat and silver in the high beams. Fog forms low, a slick belly across the shoulder, and the lane lines go loose like threads if you stare too long, which I did because the road was empty and that was the first warning I ignored. I am Ray Calder, long haul out of Kearney, running a midnight route to Cheyenne with parts that do not care if a man sleeps. I run this run because I have 3 months left on a loan that is the weight of a second person in my life, and I like winning arguments with numbers. The contract says 5 a.m. delivery, no excuses. My flaw is simple. I carry pride like extra fuel and tell my body to wait its turn, which you could do until the night decides to talk back. I told myself 1 more hour and then a catnap at a pullout. The clock on the dash read 2:56. Thin coffee from the last truck stop sat bitter on my tongue. I had half a pack of mints and a promise to myself not to turn on the music because sometimes silence keeps you sharper. The wind was steady. The sky had no moon tonight. If you ever drove without moonlight, you know how the dark feels thicker, like a room that has shut the door while you're still inside it. The GPS flickered. The screen dipped to black and came up with coordinates I didn't recognize, all zeros in the wrong places, as if I had hit the bottom of a map and fallen through. It reset on its own and pretended nothing had happened, which is what machines do when they know we will forgive them. I saw mile marker 347 ahead and counted past it. 2 minutes later, I saw 347 again. It looked a little crooked this time, like a shoulder shrugged against the fog, and then held still to be counted. The CB popped like a firecracker far away, then opened on a voice that had my drawl pinned to it. I heard my own call sign spoken with the tired smile I thought I only wore inside my head. It repeated something I had said 20 minutes before about the road being cleaner than I expected. Then it repeated it again with a drag in the vowels, like a cassette tape finding a wrinkle. I told myself bleed through happens, that signals skip on cold nights, and I kept driving even as the hair along my arms decided it already believed a different explanation. On the shoulder past a shallow ditch, I caught the flash of a symbol on a bent guardrail. It looked like a circle cut in half, and the top half had some little teeth along the edge. The kind of thing kids carve with a pocket knife for no reason other than to leave a mark brighter than their names. It did not belong to anything on this highway. It was not a brand. It sat in my mind like an itch. I told myself I would keep an eye out for it, which was the first little promise the road held me to later. I remember an old story from this stretch, the kind drivers tell because silence always wants to be filled. A fatal pileup in fog years ago one truck asleep at the wheel, a chain of brakes and steel that kept linking until it was a wall across the lanes. I pushed it away. Some stories are too heavy to ride with. Then an invisible hand slid the smell of burned rubber through the vent, faint, sweet, not from me, not from now, like someone had struck a match under the past and then smothered it again. Half an hour later, a blue and white gas station rolled out of the fog like an island. I pulled in for the sake of my eyelids. The cashier, with a silver stud in his nose, looked at me like a man looking into a mirror he didn't trust. "You ever had that?" He said I was quick, that I had just been through, the chips still warm from my hand. He slid a receipt across the counter with my name scrawled on it, timed at 3:47. I checked my dash when I got back to the rig, and the digits said the same. But I had not stopped before. Not there. Not at 3:47. I would remember a silver stud catching the light like that, wouldn't I? I told myself 2 gas stations can look the same. Corporate design. Smiling blue logos. The mints tasted like the ones I had bought earlier in a different hour. I watched the station shrink in the mirror, and then, some miles later, found an identical one, which could be a coincidence if you wanted to be generous at 1 in the morning. The problem was the attendant, the same stud glitter, the same way he tucked one thumb into his apron. He did not just look like the first man. He was him. He nodded as if he had expected me to come back sooner. I took the county road when it offered itself like an escape route. The asphalt thinned. The center line broke into dots that seemed to drift. I followed a little radio tower that blinked red at the top like a patient heartbeat, and I ended up at a T that should not have been there. My headlights washed a new sign. Mile 347, crooked, the same battered corner, the exact same stickers on the post like dead leaves that had learned to cling. I pulled a plastic bottle from the cup holder and tossed it onto the shoulder to mark myself. 40 minutes later, I passed that bottle again, sitting right where I knew I had left it, and something in me stopped pretending we were in the world I had paid for. The CB opened on a whisper that came from too close to my ear. "Ray," the voice said, then a little hiss, then "Ray, please." I grabbed the mic and gave my call sign anyway, because rules relax when you think you know who is talking. A driver said he needed help at 347, that his rig looked like mine down to the dent on the right fender. He described the decal on my back door that my daughter had drawn before I left the house for this run. He named the route and the drop. He used the exact phrase I used with dispatch, like he was copying a script. I asked him where he was, and he said here, and then his voice ran forward of mine by a few seconds and repeated a question I had not yet asked. I told myself someone was messing with me. There are bored people out here who want to hear fear. Or maybe there was a highway test going on, some government experiment with signal repeaters. I counted the ways it could be rational. I was good at that until I remembered I had been good at it years ago on a night that ended with sirens and a corner zipper and me sitting in a ditch with my palms bleeding from grip. The night did not need my permission to put old pictures back on the projector in my head. The mile markers started to count backward in little gasps of reflection. 350, 349, 348, 347, and then 348 again. All same scuff, same paint bubble like a blister in the metal. The clock on my dash froze at 3:47 and stayed there no matter how long I drove. The fog thickened in a way that made the high beams worse, like shining a flashlight into milk. The billboard for a farm equipment dealer lifted out of the dark in big, friendly letters, and then, as my rig passed, the letters slid away like dust wiped from a pane, leaving blank white. I stopped on the shoulder to check my trailer. The diesel clattered down into stillness. The air felt colder than the thermometer said it should be. I walked around and found my own tire tracks in the gravel coming in from a different angle. I had not made those tonight. My flashlight picked up that circle symbol again, carved into a post near the ditch. Fresh curls of wood peeled from the cut. My glove brushed against them and came away with a sliver. The symbol felt like a door. The symbol felt like a warning. The symbol felt like my handwriting when I am too tired to be neat. I got back behind the wheel and pulled onto the highway. The headlights fell on the back of a trailer with my company name in the same worn letters. My dent, my mud flaps patterned with that dumb joke decal my cousin gave me. I should not have been behind myself. It was like standing behind your own chair and watching the crown of your head and trying not to touch. I instinctively flashed my brights to warn the driver. The red running lights on the other trailer did not blink. The lane lines funneled us together until I was following my own wake as if I had been bleeding paint. I reached for my phone. It went from half to dead while I watched the battery icon drain like a wound in the screen. The GPS lost its roads and turned its face to a grid without names. Every number on the dash said 347 like it had learned that number and decided to repeat it until I did too. I could pull over and wait for morning. I could go 15 miles an hour and hope a real exit showed up. I could also fall asleep where I sat and slide into a guardrail gentle as a yawn. If you have ever white-knuckled through that fight, you know the worst choice looks like the easiest one because it lets you stop thinking. I chose movement. I pressed the accelerator and crowdsourced courage from noise. My headlights flooded the back of my own trailer and the letters on it glowed like something underwater. The CB yelled feedback when I keyed the mic, that ring you get when you're too close to your own speaker. Immediate consequence. I cannot pretend the loop was anything else. Delayed echo. The voice that had matched mine a few minutes ago came back sobbing, which is not a sound I knew I could make yet. I kept telling myself there had to be a practical reason. Maybe a signal amp out here was broken and bouncing my transmissions back to me. Maybe a road crew had accidentally set up duplicate mile markers, and I was confusing them. Maybe there was a military test using fog as a medium, and I had wandered inside. They use landscapes as labs sometimes. I talked myself into calm, and then I checked the dash cam out of habit, because even a lab does not usually show you what I saw next. The cam recorded a truck in front of me that was mine in every way. I watched my hands on the wheel of that truck scratch at the corner of my mouth, a nervous tic from when I chewed too much tobacco in my 20s. I watched the driver ahead of me reach for the same coffee cup I had emptied miles ago. Then my rig in the video took the left lane without a signal, and I could hear my own voice lagging me by minutes, asking if anyone could copy at marker 347. The cam should not hear my CB. It did. It heard it twice. There was no government letterhead in that. I pulled over again where the fog thinned and walked to the shoulder with my light. The circle symbol sat on a fresh cut of wood on the post. My glove brushed the edge and caught a blue thread from my own sleeve the way a bramble will steal from you and keep it. I had marked this place without knowing it, which is one of the worst feelings I know. The smell of burned rubber returned and did not behave. It walked around me like a person, stronger to the left, strongest when I faced the way my other tire tracks had come in. A voice on the CB, my own voice if I'm honest, told me not to go past 347 again. It said please in a way I do not use with anyone except my family. It said that mile like it was a date I had circled and failed to keep. I could stop right there and wait, but I had never stopped at an order given in my own tone. Pride is a habit. Contracts are a habit. The clock had not moved. If all clocks are liars tonight, then I could make it by 5 a.m. if I ignored the ones that refused to play fair. I went. I pushed the pedal until the engine made a hungry sound. The highway straightened like someone had pulled a string tied across a floor. Fog pushed back from a grill in steady billows. 347 lifted into the beams and seemed to laugh with the wet look of the reflectors. I passed it, and the radio screamed with the sound of two mics in the same room, bare bones feedback, and something else under it with human shape. You know how some noises were faces, even when you were sane? This one knew me by my first name. The world slid sideways. I do not have better words. 1 second there was Nebraska night, and the next there was me watching me from outside, which is a violation. My high beams hit the back of a trailer that belonged to me, and through the rear glass of the cab I could see myself, younger by some hours, rubbing at my eyes an emotion I wish I had never taught myself. I saw the moment the old heaviness pulled at the hinge of my head. I grabbed the mic and shouted my name and the marker and the word wake like a father at a pool. The driver ahead of me flinched and overcorrected. The past knows nothing about you until you knock on it, and then it throws open a door you are not ready for. The skid started. It is a long, slow betrayal when a 40,000-pound load decides to go wherever mass takes it. The sound of rubber separating from itself is a hissing scream. I watched my own trailer break loose in the mirror of a moment I had lived and then tried to forget. In that old night, I had told the coroner the fog came out of nowhere. In this one, I watched the fog arrive from my grill like I was blowing it forward. I was the ghost in my memory that had tried to save me and had made it worse by giving me one more thing to react to. I pulled right and set my hazards because reflex is a refuge. I hopped out with triangles like I was back in training filmland. I set one and watched it sit on the asphalt like a well-behaved triangle. I set the second and the shape went soft, edges sucked inward, and the plastic turned dim. The third slid a few inches toward the ditch as if a hand under the road had tugged it down by a string. The smell of burnt rubber turned thick, sweet, cloying, the way some flowers can make a room dizzy if you forget to open a window. In the wash of my high beams, I saw the other me stumble out of the cab and sit in the gravel and put his hands on his knees. I moved to go to him to put a palm on his back between the shoulder blades because nobody had done that for me on the night that started this story, and my hand met air that boiled cold. It bent my fingers into a shape they did not want to hold. I said his name, which was my name, and he looked up, and if I believed in mirrors, I would say I understood something I had not paid for until then. I was the thing that had haunted me. The old wreck did not become fresh metal and blood again. That is mercy. I was given the sound and the smell and the fear without the gore, which is how a nightmare behaves when it wants to be invited back later. The scene tilted and slid, and the fog took the edges off until there were only 3 things left to carry. The mile marker pulsing like an eye, the circle symbol cut into the post, and now bleeding sap like tears, and a voice on the CB that kept saying still out here, as if that phrase could anchor a man. The moment broke like thin sugar under a spoon. I found myself back behind the wheel, my hazard still ticking, the fog peeled to a milky skin around the hood. The clock said 3:47 because of course it did. My hand smelled like sap and old burned rubber. The grid on the GPS had roads again, but no names. I eased forward because you cannot stay parked forever in a haunted mile. The tires hissed over a patch of something that was not water and not oil, and I did not look in the mirror because there are some gestures you cannot afford. Dawn is not a flip. It is a stain that spreads very slowly at the bottom of the sky until you notice there are colors again. The fog thinned as if someone had opened one small window at a time. The first car I had seen in hours rolled past me, a compact with a pair of fuzzy dice that looked old enough to remember when things were softer. The driver slowed at 347 and then sped up, and in the mirror, I saw him tap the brakes like a man tapping his pocket to reassure himself he still owned his wallet. I rolled by the blue and white station one last time. The attendant without his nose stud stood out front smoking and gave me that particular nod men give other men when both of them have done a night they did not want to talk about. I checked the dash cam at the next pullout. Not because I needed proof for anyone, but because sometimes you want a thing that will lie to you in a way your body can believe. The file was there. It showed 40 minutes of fog and the grain of the road, and me muttering to myself. The part where a truck that looked exactly like mine appeared had been replaced by ripple, like heat on asphalt, which is one more way a machine protects us from believing the wrong thing too easily. I did not make Cheyenne by 5 a.m. I called dispatch from a payphone outside a diner because my phone would not hold a charge past a throat clearing. The woman who answered had a voice that could talk down a fire. She said I sounded like I had been crying, and I told her the wind was rough. She knew better, but we both agreed to pretend. She asked where I was, and I told her a marker number without the 3 in front of it. I told her I was past something that looks like the past, and that I would bring her a coffee just after sunup. On the shoulder at mile 347, a second driver would later tell me, there were fresh tire marks that looped into a spiral and then stopped like a dog had been turning in circles to make a bed right on the asphalt. He said he did not like how the spiral pointed, which is a strange detail, but I understood. Some shapes point at you even when they are not arrows. He said he caught a smell like burned sugar and rubber glued together, and that it made him think of Christmas and Rex. As the sky finished bleaching out the night, the mile marker ahead of me flickered once. The number on it rolled forward from 347 to 348 like a child showing off a magic trick. Then it slid back to 347 like an apology. I drove past and did not look at the symbol on the post, though my glove still wore a blue thread from it. The CB stayed quiet as a held breath until a little bit of nothing stirred and a voice repeated still out here in my own drawl with a patience that made my teeth hurt. If you think the story ends with a grand explanation, I can only say that the road prefers riddles. I kept my contract by noon, and I paid the loan in the end because that is how you outstare certain ghosts. On certain nights, when the fog sets low like a white dog sleeping across the lanes, I still map my route around that mile, even when my map says I do not need to. I do not drive at 347 if I can help it. I do not keep triangles in the front anymore. I do not let silence get too thick. And when the CB clicks alive on a dry, ordinary afternoon, when the sun bakes the world flat and there is no excuse for goose flesh, I sometimes hear a man use my call sign and ask if anyone can copy at marker 347. I keep my thumb off the mic. I let the air answer. The voice waits. It says still out here, like a note pinned to a door nobody opens anymore. And I find myself counting mile markers for no reason until the numbers feel like they're counting back toward me instead. Story 2. Breaker on the unlisted channel, the CB, came to life in an empty cab and said my name before I touched the mic, like the night had memorized me while I slept with my eyes open, and I sat up straighter with the road black as a cut ribbon ahead, wondering who else knew my frequency. The dark between rest stops is not silence. It creaks in panels and hums in glass, and the wind sneaks through door seals like a whisper that has learned your route. Red taillights appear and shrink until they are just 2 stars going cold. Out here, the heater smells faintly metallic, and the coffee in the thermos tastes like it has borrowed age from the thermos walls. If you have driven a dead zone, you know radio quiet becomes a shape that leans closer every mile. Name is Hank Doolin. Reefer freight across the Dakotas, winter lanes that bite. Practical type. CB in the dash for company, not for campfire stories. Dispatch hung a fat bonus on this run if I cleared a 500-mile stretch by sunup. I told myself to treat superstition like ice on the shoulder. Notice it, steer around it, don't pretend it is not there. My flaw is simple. I like proof, and the night is not a place that bends to proof unless it wants to teach you a lesson first. I kept the radio on 19 for the chatter. Truckers swapping weather and rumors. Static stitched the gaps like a cheap blanket. The dash clock said 1:58 a.m., then climbed toward the hour I hate most. The cold had teeth, and the heater fought it with a tired fan. I took a swallow of coffee and kept the lane center punched while snowfields shone under starlight like someone had laid white sheets over sleeping animals you did not want to wake. The CB crackled once, twice, then found a tone that was not mine, but knew mine. "Hank," it said, easy as a friend. "You awake?" I was, but I had not given my handle. I glanced at the channel and frowned because the blue LED showed a half number I had never seen. 21.5, a smudge of a digit. I spun the knob, and it landed on 21, then 22, like it had jumped a crack in the face of a clock. The voice waited. "Hank, come back if you copy." I told myself a splintered channel happens when a dial gets old. I keyed the mic and kept it casual. "This is Doolin, rolling west. You got a problem, friend?" The static pulsed like a small heart under ice. "Breaker 21.5, the voice said, amused. "Copy that, Hank. Only people who have eaten in the same diner say your name like that." The red taillights ahead blinked and were gone, like a promise taken back. My eyes went to the clock because I needed a normal anchor. 2:14 a.m. The minute ticked toward the one that always feels too long, and the heater coughed like a man who hides his cough. "You're behind me," a woman's voice said, overlapping the first, smoky and precise. Blue Kenworth, reefer humming like an old song. My radar showed no one at distance. "Name's Sally Two-Tone," she added. That handle had a story attached to it. A driver who went missing around this route years ago. Last words lost in static. Her laugh came through as a warm hum, the kind of sound you trust before you remember you should not. "You ride smooth, Doolin," she said. "Keep it that way, and we'll make 2:15 together." I let go of the mic to see what the radio would do if I did nothing. The LED dipped again and showed 21.5, like it was a time printed in numbers that only lived in this cab. Static made a soft rhythm, the exact pace of my pulse if I lay a finger to my neck. The clock on the dash clicked to 2:15, then stopped. I pressed my thumb against the face as if it would bow back in emotion because I asked. It did not. The heater slipped colder as if someone had opened a door I hadn't heard, and breath clouded the glass in a feathered bloom. "Breaker 21.5, the first voice said, calm as a caretaker. "You want to transmit forward tonight, Hank?" A phrase that felt wrong and right at the same time. I wiped the fog from the inside of the windshield and watched my hand leave a clear oval like a window within a window. "What's transmit forward?" I asked because my mouth gets curious when my spine gets cautious. The lights across the dash dimmed a fraction, then brightened, as if the truck had nodded to someone stepping in and out of the cab when I wasn't looking. Sally rolled in over them, soft. "It's the only way to punch through this stretch," she said. "No road ice, no troopers, no time lost. Copy me and you'll see my taillights. Lose me and you'll ride alone." In the glass, I saw only my own hung-over reflection of a man who had skipped dinner and hid tired behind caffeine. The radar stayed empty. "Where are you exactly?" I asked, and to try to make it sound like a joke. "Right ahead," she said. "Close enough to hear your fan belt sing. You didn't fix that squeak last month, did you?" I had not told a soul about that belt. Pride tells you to fix everything yourself, and then lets you forget something small until a stranger says it out loud. I could feel the way my pulse nudged the CB's static a little faster when the road curved, slower on a straight. "Government test," I offered, as if the dark would answer in a lab coat. "Mag field anomaly?" The first voice laughed kindly in my ear. The way a doctor might before he tells you this part will sting. Every driver has a science that helps him sleep, it said. Pick yours. I flipped from 19 to 17 to 9 and back. Every channel tasted like snow. Every channel empty except the half number that fit like a paper cut. 21.5 knew my handle, my belt, my route. The heater blew cold now, as if the air had been stolen from the road and mailed back wrong. Frost crept from the corners of the windshield like slow handwriting. If you have ever felt winter write your name on glass, you know how it waits for you to make a mistake before it finishes the last letter. Say it, the caretaker voice coaxed. Breaker clear at 215. The words felt like a key under my tongue. I could ignore them and drive blind, risk losing the bonus and the rhythm that keeps a man awake through an hour that squeezes attention out of your fingers. Or I could follow the road that someone else drew for me and admit the night had better pens. I hesitated, which is a choice. The static matched my heartbeat and then got ahead of it, the way paces get out of sync when one person begins to lead. Doolin, Sally said, a smile living behind the syllables. Do you want the road clean? She sounded close enough to be in the jump seat. I picture a red scarf on the seat and a thermos cup with lipstick on the rim. These images help brains behave. Say it, and I'll show you a minute that never burns out. She let the last two words hang, as if they were a story she was proud to tell to only one person at a time. And my hand found the mic even as my better sense reached for the power switch instead. I kept the CB on. It was pride and weariness and the smell of cold rubber working together. Breaker clear at 215, I said, and the truck shuddered like it had driven from sun into shade. The radio light flipped color, an inversion to red that made every number look like it had been written in blood and dried and flaked, and my breath bloomed again, thicker. Immediate consequence. The other channels went dark, as if the dial had been painted on. Only 21.5 remained, a red pupil that did not blink when I stared back. Copy that, Hank, the caretaker said, satisfied. Transmitting forward. The dash lights dimmed and brightened to a rhythm that felt like lungs. The static pulse met my heart and then overruled it, establishing a new speed, a cold metronome the body wants to obey because disobedience costs warmth. I eased forward and watched blacktop unwind like film. And there, where empty road had been a fact, two taillights hung, low and red, slow drifting as if smoke had learned how to own glass. There you are, Sally murmured. Nice and easy. No brakes unless I brake first. I followed those lights because the living like to follow what glows. The radar stayed blank. The clock stayed at 2:15. The snowfield to my right held a fence line that ran perfect until it kinked without reason, as if someone had pushed a finger in a soft wire and then smoothed it back too quickly. You're thinking rebroadcast, the caretaker said, casual as a man ordering soup. Old convoy chatter bouncing off high clouds. You believe that you get to keep believing you control the dial. It felt like a kindness to be teased into an explanation that let me stay the hero, even if the tone said hero was not the role available tonight. Then what am I hearing? I asked, because the road gives you questions in exchange for miles, and a man should spend what he's paid with. A pause, and then, lost drivers call from between signals, he said. They answer only those who already listen too closely. I watched my fingers on the wheel, because my hands sometimes want to do things my head has not approved. The heater blew straight, frost now. It fanned across my knuckles like sugar gone wrong, and the skin of my hands prickled as if remembering childhood snow with the part of me that hates to be still. Sally's voice softened. I went through here in a squall that made day feel like a rumor, she said. Call for a breaker, said the words they offered. Been riding this minute ever since. It's a good minute if you let it be. No way stations. Nothing decays. No regrets louder than the engine. You just keep rolling with me." Her taillights floated a little like boat lanterns in tide. For a second, I saw a shadow of a trailer. Letters ghosted, then the glow took them back. Or, she added, huskier, "You can wrestle the dial until it eats your fingers." Government relay, I insisted, clinging to my last railing. A test bed. The clock glitch is some EMI bleed. The frost is the heater resistor blowing. Red LEDs invert when the dimmer fails. "I'll put this in a report and scare supervisor." The caretaker chuckled, and I hated that I liked his chuckle. "Then why did the radio tell you about your belt squeak?" he asked, and the dash let off a little cricket scratch that proved the point. "Why does the static take your pulse?" The CB hissed it back to me, my heart quickening because being measured makes it do that. I tested the power switch. It clicked off under my thumb and nothing changed. The red LCD stayed lit as if the truck had invented electricity without me. I pulled the fuse from its slot, and the radio's hum lowered to a whisper while the digits held steady, the way a stubborn candle will laugh at wind before it agrees to die. I put the fuse in my breast pocket for petty revenge. The digits did not care. The minute held. The taillights ahead winked twice, slow, a reassurance or a warning that refused to label itself for my convenience. Point of no return is a phrase people misuse. The caretaker said, conversational, as if we were to counter sharing pie. They make it sound like a cliff. It's smaller. It's when you say a sentence and can't unsay it. You already said it, Hank. The heater fan sighed into a lower gear and the cab went very quiet. "But I'll give you a trade," Sally said. "One truth for another. You say it again, sure and clean, and I'll let you see what you want to believe this is." I did not want to bargain in a minute that did not advance, and I did. "Breaker clear at 215, I repeated, and the road leaned, or my head did. The cab got colder with a weight that made breath feel borrowed. The red numbers in the dash curled brighter at the edges, like embers getting fanned. The CB speaker filled with whispers at the edge of words, like people leaning in at the back of church. I gripped the wheel and told myself I was not shaking. The taillights in front of me edged farther, then closer, like my distance changed according to their memory of me, not mine of them. Then I heard my own voice from 19. Panicked raw. "Kill the radio," I told myself 10 seconds before I reached for where the switch used to matter. "Hank, kill it," I begged. I sounded younger, the way men sound when they're asking for advice they would not give. "Don't repeat it, no matter what she says." I spoke on 2 channels at once, like 2 rooms sharing a door. The red light strobed with the syllables, and the frost hissed on the inside of the windshield like rain on a stove. The heater fan slowed to a crawl, and the cab's breath turned to glass. The whispers in the speaker braided into words as the temperature dropped. "Still rolling," they said with 1,000 mouths, hopeful as a promise on a bad day. Sally's taillights lifted onto a rise and vanished into a powdery white that was not snow and not fog, but the suggestion of both, like a memory of a blizzard put through a cheap filter. I eased the rig over the crest and saw her for the first time, truly saw her. The outline of a cab in the old shape. Chrome eaten by time that technically did not pass. A scarf in the jump seat. Red as a stop sign no trooper would ever write. She looked back at me in the mirror for a heartbeat. Not a face. A tilt of a hat's brim. An acknowledgement of a game you agreed to play. Then she melted back into the brightness, and the brightness folded, and the road became a ribbon weaved through a minute that would not get spent. The static matched my pulse, and then began to teach it a different beat, slower, colder. My hands numbed on the wheel until the leather could have been stone. If you have ever tried to keep a rig between the lines while your body becomes a story the environment tells, you know exactly how small a man can feel. Here's your answer. The caretaker said gently, almost sorry. It isn't a frequency. It's a time. 2:15, kept open like a pocket for those who said the words. We don't take you. You take yourself. You transmit forward, and you set the hook. The truck eased into a groove I did not choose. The world outside kept its posture. Inside, I could feel the engine through the floor as if it were on the other side of a wall. You can ride this minute forever, Sally said, affectionate, like a woman showing you her favorite room. No scales, no questions, only road. I tried to scream at myself from 19 again. All I did was fog the glass with a shape that looked like a man's chest going shallow. The CB let my fear through as a thin line, a whistle between teeth. Kill it, my younger voice begged, and my thumb slid against plastic that felt warm in a cold room. The engine note lowered to a drone that could have been a lullaby if you didn't know better. My breath slowed without my consent. I do not recommend the sensation of your own pulse deciding a different employer. I did the only desperate thing left. I yanked the mic cord free and threw it to the floor. The red light did not blink. The whispers did not stop. The frost climbed higher on the glass like ivy. The taillights ahead settled into a distance measured in faith, not feet. My body froze in postures it chose for economy. The clock on the dash, the one I had tapped like a stubborn barometer, stayed obediently at 2:15 a.m., loyal now to something older than me. Somewhere in the world, my real truck rolled silent down a black ribbon with a driver who looked like a statue a sculptor had abandoned before finishing the eyes. Out here, in the space where the minute repeats, I felt everything slower and sharper, the way you can feel a cut better after the cold takes it. The heater made one last noble cough and then joined the quiet. Breaker 21.5, Sally said, cheerful as a hostess. Copy that. We are clear. And even frozen, I smile because her satisfaction had a human shape, and I like that about people who sell you their favorite prisons. The red taillights receded by an inch. The whispers in the speaker threaded into harmony for a second, and then fell apart again like they always would. I listened to my own voice trail off on 19, the panic in it fading as if you were being pulled into sleep. I wanted to tell him something useful, some trick with a fuse or a prayer that makes electricity blink, but you cannot reach backward unless the backward wants you. The caretaker let out a small breath, the kind you give a job done right. Welcome forward, Hank, he said. Keep it between the lines. Years later, if years are real, a boy I trained heard the half number on a clear winter night. He told me he thought he had imagined it until the static took his pulse and taught it a different rhythm. He went home and told his partner he had almost said a sentence that tasted like iron. He didn't say it, and that is why he got home. But sometimes when he runs that stretch, the radio wakes on its own and a man says, very politely, Breaker 21.5, any copy, like he is afraid of being rude. He told me this in a diner, over eggs that steamed and a coffee that had not learned to taste like the pot yet. He did not know he was telling me my own ending. He said the voice on the radio sounded experienced and tired and fair. He said a woman came on and laughed like she was offering him a shortcut between storms. He said he tore the mic free and drove with his hand shaking until the dawn got his color back. He asked if I believed him, and I told him yes because I liked him. If you ever pass through there at 2:15 on a winter night and your CB blinks a number that isn't a number and a voice knows your name like the name is something you borrowed, you could do what I didn't. You can let the silence be the loudest thing in the cab. You can keep your pulse, or you can say the words and join a road that does not erode. Either way, you'll hear us for one long minute, which is all some of us ever asked for once upon a time. Copy that, still rolling. Story 3, Way station number 13, I rolled up to a way station that did not exist on my route sheet, and the sign above the glass box flickered between open and a hard green 13, as if the number itself were deciding whether to admit me. And I found myself asking the kind of question drivers only ask when the road answers back. Who weighs you if no one is here to do the weighing? Kansas night stretched out as a low ceiling. The plains flat and hushed except for a wind that brought the smell of hay and cold iron. The fluorescent tubes inside the booth pulsed a sickly green that made the snow patches look like bruises. The scale beeped an unhelpful pace, slow and patient, a heartbeat that was not mine. The intercom stayed dead. The concrete felt damp through the soles of my boots even before I stepped out, like the ground had been sweating secrets all evening. Name is Lucas Brandt. Second solo run. Hauling 42,000 pounds of livestock feed to a co-op that had promised me a handshake and a signature at dawn if I arrived clean. Company probation since the minor crash in the yard last month bent my pride and my fender in equal measure. My father was a trucker too, and the story the family tells is he was fired for fudging a weight 20 years back. You know how that kind of story sits in your ribs. Tonight was about setting it, right even if I had to white knuckle a little. The GPS drew a polite gray line and swore there was no station here at mile 213. The DOT app agreed, but the road pulled me into the ramp with the quiet authority of a habit I did not remember learning. I told myself skipping a station that appears is worse than stopping at one that should not be, because a violation is a violation even when it does not fit on a map. The deadline pressed on my left temple like a thumb. If you have ever driven with a clock in your skull, you know how it makes your eyes skip ahead to the next sign. The intercom snapped awake and called out in a calm, canned voice that still managed to know me. Unit 734, please pull forward. The number pinned me like a hand on my shoulder. 734 was stenciled on my door in white. I had not keyed a mic. I had not set my call sign. The scale's hum rose a half step. Through the booth glass, I thought I saw a ledger book sitting open like a mouth, pages held by a weight. I told myself the state had upgraded the automation. Then the open light winked 3 times like someone winking back. I rolled onto the pad slow. The rig settled with a shiver that ran up the frame into my teeth. The digital readout spun its red digits and then stuttered. Instead of a number, it displayed 2 words. Heavy with it. That is not a unit of measure, I learned in orientation. I laughed once in the quiet because I am the kind of driver who tries to domesticate fear by naming it a software glitch. The wind moved in the grass beyond the fence like bodies turning in sleep. The intercom waited me out as if it knew waiting was the strongest argument. Dispatch, you copy, I said, keying my phone as speaker, because sometimes you need another voice even if it is going to be annoyed. Static curled through like paper burning. Then my own voice rode back on the line a second ahead of me. Am I clear for way? It asked a question I had not asked yet, but was about to. The moment snapped closed around me like a case. I watched my breath fog the glass and leave a round window where my face should have been, and I did not like the way the shape looked at me. Open green light. Close booth. The hum got louder and then quiet again, as if someone were breathing through a blanket. If you have ever been weighed in silence, you know how loud guilt can get. The sign above the lane stuttered between open and 13, as if those were 2 parts of the same instruction. I put the truck in neutral and checked the parking brake with a compulsive tug. The engine idle sounded a little thin, the way voices sound when the phone compresses them into distance. I took a chance. I eased off the pad an inch. The engine coughed and died. The steering wheel locked. The dash lights dimmed to a dim patient red. The readout on the scale kissed the words again like an old habit. Heavy with it. The smell of ozone got into the cab like a joke I did not want to get. Underfoot, A vibration came up from the concrete that did not belong to my wheels or any other wheels. It was a hum as steady as the one that rides a chapel organ when the organist pauses to listen. The intercom crackled. Unit 734, it said, and the number made my palms settle into sweat. Driver exit cab. I could drive off and take the violation and the yelling later. I saw my father's face in my head with the tired look he wore when he talked about DOT stops. A look that said you could do everything right and still come up short. The green flicker over the glass gathered itself and threw a little more light my way. I opened the door. Cold ran in over my ankles like a low animal and sat there. The booth door stuck at first as if it had a hand on the other side. When it let go, I stepped into the green. The fluorescent tubes buzzed up close like a hornet nest behind a wall. The ledger book sat open on the counter, cloth-bound and heavy, the paper cream-colored and worn at the edges like a hymnal. Names in neat block letters filled the left column. Dates in pencil. In the far right, where I expected numbers with decimals, the entries used bad scales. Regret, fear, lie, shame. A few had one rare word. Balanced. My name sat near the bottom of the open page. Not in my writing, tonight's date written next to it with a confidence that made me feel late to my own life. The intercom popped. Unit 734, confirm identity, it said, and I heard my father's voice under the tinny speaker tone, the same way you can hear the original song under a cover if you already love it. A framed photo hung crooked near the glass. My father, in his old company jacket, stood beside a truck that carried my current number, 734, on the door. He had his hand on the hood like a man telling a story to a patient animal. The power snapped off. Everything but the pad went quiet and dark with that cottony black that feels thick enough to push on. The scale kept its glow, a low green that climbed up from the seams. My phone died without a goodbye. The world beyond the booth turned into a mirror because the glass was now the brightest thing for miles. In that mirror, my reflection looked fine except for one detail. My jacket was not mine. It was my father's old company jacket, the patch frayed, the cuffs worn to gray. I touched my sleeve and felt my own nylon. In the glass, I wore his wool. I stepped back and found my heel against the threshold. This was the kind of moment everyone says decide, and they do not see the part where both choices cost something you cannot replace. I could wave the intercom off and run the rig blind into the night and take whatever ticket follow me later. I could stay and let a station that should not be measure something that did not have a unit. I stood there and heard the hum settle into that patient heartbeat again and felt it nudge my own. I chose to weigh. As soon as I took my hand off the door, it answered with a latch I did not control. The bolt slid with a neat click that sounded like a pen finishing a signature. The intercom breathed once. I could hear microphones wearing dust. I could see the camera dome above the counter and every little sensor dot in the ceiling and all the things a nervous driver assumes are watching him. The red herring tightened around me, right on cue. Enough hardware to run a psychology experiment. Enough lights to make a man think he had been profiled and filed before the test began. I try to comfort myself with that idea. If this was a government eval, I had survived worse paperwork. A little theater to scare drivers straight, some internal compliance thing to couch it in ethics. Then the ledger yanked that comfort out by the roots. The right column's units were wrong and perfect at the same time. Shame 184 pounds. Lie 201 pounds. Fear 153 pounds. A single word popped up again and again where a number should have been, and each time it made my throat feel binding. Balanced. Sharp pencil marks crossed out certain lines. A few entries had my father's last name written small in the margin like a teacher's note. The intercom found a new tone softer and more human, and told me to step onto the painted square in front of the desk. The pad under it glowed with a confidence that wanted to be believed. My name scrolled across the readout in red letters. Lucas Brandt, and next to it my truck ID, 734, like a dossier cover on suspicion. I hesitated long enough to hear the hum dip and surge like a living thing annoyed at being made to wait. I stepped on. The pad felt warmer than the floor, like a hand. The display climbed. It passed every number my body has ever touched, as if numbers did not apply. The words changed and then changed back again like a radio tuning between stations. Heavy with it. Carrying for two. Unit 734. The booth vibrated. Paper shivered. The glass showed my father's jacket on my reflection, collar up to the chin like he used to wear in wind. The hum grew until it filled teeth and ears. Whispers rose through the intercom, too many to be one man's regret. If you have ever walked into a room full of people who already know the story you're trying not to tell, you know that sound. Lucas, my father said. No intercom tin, just his voice braided into the hum like it had always been there. He stood where the photo said he had stood, just outside the booth in the green wash, hand on the hood, face lit so it belonged to both past and present. You cannot falsify the truth forever, he said. Not angry. Sorry, but not so sorry he had forgotten right from wrong. He was not talking about the weight of feed in my trailer. He was talking about last month in the yard when I nudged a post and then wrote a description that curved around the word hit. I did not want the room to know that. I did not want a booth to know that. I said it anyway because the hum had found the part of me that gets tired of being my own lawyer. I told the glass the words I had scratched in my head for 3 weeks and called it nothing. I said it out loud, like a confession to a sink. The digits on the readout did a strange thing. They stopped climbing. Then they fell a little, the way a pressure gauge relaxes after a valve opens. They settled on a phrase that made my breath loosen. Admitted. He nodded in a way he used to nod at baseball practice when I finally watched the ball instead of the swing. The hum did not stop. The whispers did not stop. The intercom collected all the words my father had ever used to tell me to do better and pressed them to my chest until they felt like my words. The readout threw a new flash. Past due. I understood without wanting to. His story had not ended with a firing. It had ended here. Not blood, not impact. A man full of lies about his weight and his money and his pride stepped up to an instrument that refused to be fooled and had not stepped back out. 734 was my rig, he said, and I felt the number settle into the bones of the booth. When they put you in your truck last year, they reused it because numbers get recycled when people do not. I try to keep the number quiet. I told myself keeping it off my tongue would keep it off your door. But the road is not a place that bends to wishes. He put his palm on the glass, and for a second the cold from his side felt like the cold from mine, 2 panes of winter making one. The scale trembled. The ledger's pages riffled, though no breeze moved. Names I had never spoken rode the barrier. Some of them were men who had trained me with their own lies about miles they had driven without sleep. Some of them were stories I had heard in diners about missing trucks and the people who loved them being told to stop asking. The display went white at the edges, and then a red phrase cut through with the simplicity a knife brings to tangled rope. Balanced. The latch undid itself with a sigh. The booth door opened. The hum dropped to a deep hush like tires on far asphalt. I stepped off the pad and felt the floor turn back into concrete. The glass in front of me still held a reflection. He wore my face, my hair, my eyes, and my father's jacket, but he did not move when I did. He lifted one hand and put it flat to the pane. I did not mirror him. He did it again, and I realized he was not copying me. He was waiting for me to copy him. I chose to turn away, and the choice thumped through the building like a heartbeat that had been waiting to be counted. Outside, my rig had turned its own key. The engine idled as if it had been running all along. Headlights cut the dark in a pair of patient cones. The cab smelled faintly of wool. The green open sign blinked in a fast little burst that felt like a goodbye or a warning kept short, so would not make me stay. I climbed in and put my hand to the wheel, and it felt like a hand I had held when I was small. And that may sound sentimental to you, but sometimes steel remembers who taught you to trust it. As the truck rolled off the pad, the station shed its light to the dirt as if color had been a coat it was done with. One by one, the tubes went to gray. The ledger sat open in the booth with my line filled in. A pencil lay on the counter like a lazy finger after a point has been made. The intercom released one last breath that said my name without saying it and did not ask for anything. The sign over the lane showed 13 without its companion, and then it shut its eye. I took the ramp back to the highway. The world beyond the fence returned to its natural dark. The hum stayed with me for a few minutes, riding the speedometer needle, then softened until it could be confused with the radio's static or my own lids wanting to fall. I made the co-op by dawn. I chalked the dock. I watched grain spill like dry rain. The sound pleasant, small, human. The manager signed the bill and handed it back with a pen that did not know my hands from any other man's. A state patrol cruiser drove through mile 213 mid-morning and found clean shoulder and nothing else. The tire marks I had left ended in a tidy rectangle that looked like a man had stopped to make a note and then decided not to. A DOT update pushed to the app at noon, adding way station 13 at mile 213 with hours listed as midnight to dawn and a reference to an internal memo no one I asked would admit existed. By evening, the update was gone, like it had been a weather warning and the clouds had changed their mind. That night, in my bunk, the sleeper dark and kind, my phone buzzed with a log alert I had not created. Digital entry. Unit 734. Weight accepted. No decimal. No ticket. The word balance sat next to the time, like a hand covering a sharper word beneath it. I did not sleep poorly. I slept as if the road itself had put a palm on the back of my head and told me to rest while it kept watch. And maybe that is how the road forgives men who learn slow. Sometimes now, when I pass a state scale that glows steady and white, I catch a different tone just at the edge of the hum. If you have stood in an empty church and felt a lone note that nobody played, you know what I mean? When my mind starts to rationalize a small thing I should say out loud, the pad hum creeps into the cab with a reminder that the world does not care for my cleverness if my cleverness is aimed the wrong direction. A green flicker will pop in the periphery of a sign and settle again, and I do not look too long. On certain nights, the glass of the passenger window gives me a double image when I glance right. Me in my jacket, and a shadow that wears my father's old one, the cuffs frayed, one button missing. He never turns his head fast. He gives me time to be brave about it. I learned to talk to him without moving my lips when the hum gets near 734 on my odometer, like it wants to play with coincidences, and I ask him little things like whether to take the left at the storm or the right where the sky is strange. I have not been back to mile 213, not on purpose. The station lives on a map that reads the heart, and once you have visited a place like that, you do not force a second trip, because you might be sent for, not invited. If you ever see 13 where you know it should say open, if you ever hear an intercom speak your unit number before you lift a finger, you can drive on and call it a glitch and wear that comfort like a jacket until it frays. Or you can stop and step onto a square of paint and say a true thing before the room says it for you. Some mornings I wake before the alarm and think I hear pages turning in a room that is not in my house. When the wind rattles something on the porch, the sound has a pencil's music in it. I think about men who taught me to back a trailer in one smooth sweep and how they might be written down somewhere, in a ledger that measures what nothing else can. I have one more entry to make someday, and I would prefer to write it with my own hand. A small word. Balanced. Story 4. Cold coffee at exit 0. The coffee steamed like it had a heartbeat, but when I touched the cup it was cold, and the neon above the counter buzzed so softly I thought I could hear it thinking about going dark, which is a strange thought to have at 3 in the morning when you swear you pulled into a diner that does not exist on any map. The place had that end-of-the-world quiet that lives under the clink of ceramic. 2 booths, a counter with chrome that remembered better days, a napkin dispenser that stuck on the first pull. Outside the windows, the desert sat up in its black coat, and the exit sign beyond the pumps flickered between exit 0 and nothing at all, like someone was erasing and writing the same word over and over until the letters forgot which way they faced. My name is Mara Jennings. I was hauling overnight medical supplies through Nevada, which means you do not stop unless you have to. I had almost drifted once this winter and caught myself by the hair, and that near miss had moved into my chest to rent a room I could not evict. Sleep felt like an animal that would eat my hands if I let it close enough. You ever get like that, where staying awake feels safer than the truth of being human? The rumor is drivers who go too long end up at exit 0. A rest stop that appears when you're most likely to make a wrong kind of decision. I laughed at that like you laugh at a ghost story in daylight. But the radio had sputtered out, and the shoulder had looked like it wanted a conversation. Then the green sign posted exit 0 with a confidence I trusted too quickly, and here I was watching steam that did not warm and listening for a heartbeat that was not mine. Refill. Honey, the waitress said, smiling with the kind of warmth that you only see in old postcards. Her name tag said June in looped pen. She moved like she had practiced every step until it made no sound. The coffee pot tilted without a tremble. My cup brimmed, and the steam sharpened again, as if the air were warming itself. "You look tired," she said, sing-song, and I heard it as a kindness until I noticed she did not blink. I told her I was fine, which was a lie told out of habit. The radio in the corner cracked a little and let out a thin thread of CB static, like a summer fly trapped in the screen. It came from a gray speaker older than me, and beneath the hiss of voice said breaker in a polite tone that did not invite an answer. "What time you got?" I asked, which is a way of asking where you are without being rude. 3:17, June said, without checking the clock, and when I looked at the clock hands, they were spinning backward with the patience of a gear thinking about being a fan again. The calendar on the wall showed April with a man in a cowboy hat tipping his brim at a sunset. The year in the corner said 1989. I smiled at it because nostalgia gets a free pass in diners. I took a sip. The coffee tasted like it always tastes at 3 a.m., like burned sugar and boiled pennies. I set it down. I told myself I would let it cool before I took another drink. I watched the window for a sign my rig was still where I had left it. And when I looked back at the cup, the coffee was steaming again, like the air had put its mouth on it and whispered hot into it while I wasn't watching. "You look tired, honey," June said again. Same tone, same syllables touching the same notes, which might be how caring sound if you're too far away from yourself. She lifted the pot, poured nothing, and the surface of my coffee flinched anyway. When I glanced outside, my rig idled with its headlights on, a square block of safety exactly where I had parked it, except I had my keys in my palm, teeth marks biting into my skin. You ever have a detail like that sit in the middle of your thoughts and refuse to move? I told myself the idle could be a timer I had set and forgotten. I told myself some trucks blink their lights when they're lonely. I folded the keys into my fist until the sharpness became proof. The radio in the corner coughed and played a sliver of my voice, which is the kind of thing that makes the skin along your arms turn to snow. I had left a distress call once, years ago, and the sound of it still carried the smoke of desperation I do not like to admit I can make. "Long night," June said, placing a plate of toast I had not ordered next to my hand. The butter sat unmelted even though the toast lifted steam. She smiled as if she recognized me from somewhere other than this conversation. The photo wall to my right caught my eye. Polaroids and flyers and snapshots in sun-bleached frames. My rig was on one of them. Same model, same din on the step, same company decal pulling at one corner like a Band-Aid. I leaned in and saw a woman beside it with my chin and my hair and my smile. June stood next to her in the photo, holding up 2 fingers in a peace sign. The date in ink said tonight. If you've ever been too tired to tell dream from road, you know how dangerous the quiet gets, I said, mostly to the window. June set the pot down and touched my wrist with 2 fingers cool as a windowsill. "Don't nap here," she said, gentle as a curtain drawn halfway. "You won't like the way you wake up." The clock hand spun backward once, twice, then slowed until the second hand became a swallowed breath. My own watch ticked like it was skipping across a pond, then stopped at 3:17 and looked proud of itself for quitting. I stood to leave because motion is the trick you teach yourself when thinking goes bad. The bell on the door tinkled a small glass note when I pulled it, and desert cold skimmed my ankles like a cat deciding whether you were worth knowing. I stepped out into diesel and dust, and the kind of silence that sounds like an abandoned stage waiting for actors. I turned toward the lot, and my boot set off a low crunch that sounded too loud. My truck sat lit and patient, engine grumbling, and I said thank you under my breath, which you do when something you own waits for you like a friend. I opened the door and saw myself asleep in the driver's seat. Sleep looks different from the outside. My jaw had relaxed into a different person's face. My hands, the ones I trust to correct into wind, lay palms down on my legs like I had been set there by a nurse. The breath fogged the glass in faint calmness. I checked my keys. They were still in my fist. I looked over my shoulder to the diner windows, and June stood in the same place she had been, wiping a clean counter with a clean rag with a concern that looked practiced. I backed away, and the door of the diner chimed again, and I found myself sliding into the booth as if my feet had learned 2 distances that both ended here. The coffee steamed. The toast kept its cold butter like a badge. "You look tired, honey," June said a 3rd time, and that was when the little bell inside me rang with the sound that means, say it out loud before it says you. I drifted, I told her. Not tonight. Before. I drifted and bumped a fender. I wrote the report so it looked like the world did it to me. June's smile softened, which is a trick smiles do when they've been waiting for you to confess. "Everyone lies a little to keep driving," she said. "You can only steer the truth so much before it steers you." She refilled a cup that did not need refilling, and for a heartbeat the steam rose in the shape of a woman's hand and vanished. The CB speaker in the corner unclenched another thread of static and let someone whisper exit 0 like the name of a person they had loved and lost. My phone had no bars, which I expected, but I dialed dispatch anyway because routine has saved me from worse things than ghosts. The call picked up into my own voice, panicked, elastic, saying mile marker numbers I knew in my bones. The last thing it played was me saying please once, which I do not say to machines. The sound ended with a hiss that could have been wind or brakes or blood in the ear. I know how it sounds. I said to nobody and to you if you're listening close, but this is where I am. Dreams are sloppy, June said, wiping a wet ring that did not belong to a cup. This is tidy. You made it yourself when you needed a kind place to sit for a minute. She moved her head a fraction, and for a flicker the light put my reflection over her face, and we were one person with two mouths both about to say the same sentence. Then the neon hummed, and the glass let us go. You always forget this part. I am not dead, I told her, because words can hold doors open if you lean your whole weight on them. I'm tired and wired and guilty and a little vain, but I am not dead. I'm going to get up, pay for this coffee, and go. You never pay here, she said, almost sorry. You always leave running. The ticking in the clock was gone. The silence had edges you could cut bread with. I stood. The muscles in my thighs buzzed with the kind of ache you get in your 7th hour when the road cleans your thoughts with a scrub brush. The bell above the door sang its little note. I stepped out into the lot again, and this time the cold did not go for my ankles. It climbed happily, like it had been waiting to be invited in. The rig sat in the same polite posture. The headlights went brighter as if I were a deer, not a driver. My breath made a cloud that looked like steam from a cup. On the passenger step, someone had set a paper bag. Inside was a single packet of sugar, the kind that feels like nothing in your hand until you need it. On the packet, someone had written in neat block letters, "Don't close your eyes." I looked up. The desert had decided to grow a fog, which is a trick I do not see often and do not like. It was not heavy yet. It was a white thought pulled thin between fence posts. I swung into the seat and found the wheel a comfort, which it always is if you've learned to love something that can kill you. I know what this is, I told the cab. This is a lucid dream. My brain is replaying scraps. The calendar at 1989 is a detail I grabbed from a movie. The steam is my breath. The photo is a diner gag. I will drive out of this if I keep moving. Red herring, you say. You're right. It felt delicious for the 20 seconds it took to build. Then the radio turned on by itself and played my last distress call, the one I had never saved, with the exact way my voice pitch broke on the second syllable of please. The rig eased forward when my foot found the pedal. The fog came toward me like a low ceiling being lowered by someone patient. The sign for the exit swung past my window in slow motion. Exit 0, exit 0, exit 0, and the last one had no letters on at all, which made the pole look like a finger pointing nowhere. I took the ramp because you learn to pick a path and stick to it. The highway beyond lay straight and white, the pain on the shoulders breathing in and out like something sleeping under it and dreaming of hills. If you've ever driven in a fog in the desert, you know it feels like a trick, I said, quiet enough not to wake anyone. The speedometer needle held a steady truth. My watch held a still lie. 3:17, patient as a parent. June's voice came through the speaker without static this time, soft as a hand over your eyes. Don't fall asleep again, she said. Not here. I wanted to ask her which ear she meant, the diner or the hour or the body, but the horn outside somewhere took that answer away and left me with brake lights. A figure stood at the shoulder, waving both arms. Headlights put my face on her face, my jacket on her shoulders, my fear on her mouth. I braked, and the brakes were good, but time had been told to stay still, and distance had not been informed. And I learned all at once that 1 minute can hold more than one person. The impact was a bright white I tasted in my teeth. Then there was no sound except the little thought of steam making a shape that looked like home. I woke in a booth with my hands on either side of the cup, which is a sentence that feels too simple for what it means. The coffee steamed. The butter did not melt. The clock hands paddled backward, lazy now, like a boy with a stick in a slow river. June was holding the pot. Her smile had made a new room for pity. You always forget, she said, like telling me about a habit of mine. You made me to keep you awake until it was done. Done, I said, tasting the word like medicine when I died. It felt like setting down a box I had been pretending was light. She nodded once. The calendar with 1989 hung in the same place it had all along. The photo of me with June sat under it. And this time I noticed the corner where the gloss had lifted, and behind it another photo, older, of the same scene, and behind that another. Layers of the same moment printed on different paper until the wall itself felt tired of holding them. Why 1989? I asked, though I already knew. You know the year your life forks, even if the rest of you refuses to look that direction. Because that's when exit 0 was paved, June said, and when you first started telling yourself that tired is something you can shame into obedience. She put the pot down carefully and finally blinked, once, as if to prove she could. You don't have to like the truth. You do have to drink it. The CB speaker played the faintest choir of voices, all saying breaker without any of them expecting an answer. I was one of them, June said, and her hand touched the place on the counter where she had been wiping nothing for as long as my story wanted. I drove into a day I couldn't finish. I made a diner that would wait with me. And every so often, you come in and I pour you what you think will help. Then you run, like always. Then you drive, like always. Then you wake here, like always. You're learning, but you're patient with yourself in a way that looks like stubborn from this side. I wanted to argue, but my bones were tired of listening to my mouth. I did the only merciful thing left to do in a room that loves you enough to keep you talking. I listened. The steam on the cup thinned until it matched the fog outside. The neon buzzed down to the memory of light. My watch waited at 3:17 like a dog who knows it will be fed when a hand reaches the mark. I still asked time. June touched my sleeve and held the fabric for a second more than necessary. "Don't fall asleep again," she said, and this time the sentence made the air heavier. I walked to the door. The bell chimed like a penny in a glass. The lot received me like an old friend who knows the story and has stopped trying to talk you out of your choices. The fog came close enough to braid my hair with little wet fingers. I climbed into the rig and started it, because that is what I have always done when I needed an answer. I drove. The ramp rose and laid itself down. The exit sign practiced its names and then forgot them. The radio allowed silence, then gathered my last words and played them back at a volume that made memory bow its head. The headlights carved a tunnel. In the soft white, I saw myself again, standing on the shoulder, waving, and for a second, I had time to consider that perhaps if I turned the wheel hard right and floored it through the scrub, I might outrun the moment. But I had made the road and the rule and the hour and the woman in the window, and all of them wanted what they were built for. The brakes were good. They were not magic. There is a mercy in how the mind protects you from your own last seconds. I will not pretend to remember all of it. I remember the smell of hot metal without the taste of blood. I remember light without pain. I remember the sound of porcelain on porcelain, the quiet clink of a cup meeting a saucer, as if someone had poured me one more try because I asked nicely. The rest is a room with a neon sign that sometimes says open and sometimes says a number that does not belong to anything but a place where everything begins. Morning came for someone else. A patrolman found an overturned rig near a mile marker with no number, only a bolt circle where a plate should have been. The logbook inside called the day 1989 in a hand that looked tired of writing. The report used other numbers for comfort. The toe went smooth. The shoulder healed like skin. Night falls again. Wind pulls at the shrubs. Sometimes, if you park and roll your window just right, you can smell coffee that has been sitting too long on heat. If you find yourself driving that way, and the exit sign flickers, and you taste copper at the back of your tongue, and you tell yourself stories about lucid dreaming and caffeine, I will not argue with you. I have said them all, and they are good sentences until you need a better one. When the clock at your wrist pauses at 3:17, and the little speaker in the corner lets a voice say breaker, as if it were an apology, you may as well pull in and meet June. She's kind even when she is me. We pool. We talk. You run. The road takes you back or it takes you in. Either way, the steam rises for a moment like breath on glass. And that is as much warmth as anyone can promise you at exit 0 before the next driver walks in and asks what time it is and looks at the clock that spins backward like a film, trying to remember how to be a world again. Story 5. Freight that knock from inside. The first knock sounded like knuckles on a refrigerator door. A single clean tap that traveled through 40 feet of steel and settled behind my ribs. And when it came again as 3 perfect knocks with the patience of someone counting my breath, I put the rig in park on that fog-damn shoulder and listened to a thing I had not loaded asking me a question I did not know how to answer yet. Fog slid low along the ditch like an animal that did not want to be named. The reeds were beads of water that flashed when the hazard lights blinked, small red eyes turning and turning. The manifest on the passenger seat read biohazardous. Do not open in a font that pretended to be helpful. I smelled diesel, coolant, and old coffee. The trailer behind me was a refrigerated steel box sealed in black tape that had gone chalky with age, like something meant to outlast arguments. If I did not pick up anything alive, what was knocking to get out? Names: Eddie Morales, independent hauler, which means the bills were my name like teeth marks. Last-minute contract from a company I had never heard of before yesterday. Kovac Transference Logistics, printed in gray ink that looked shy. Pick up at an abandoned airfield outside Trona, with a runway cracked like old porcelain under a flat sky. The cargo waited in the middle of the tarmac without forklifts or men. A metal coffin with a refrigeration unit humming a string of notes that did not match the temperature gauge. The money was real. I checked twice. My daughter's hospital account does not take apologies, only deposits. I told myself the cold kept anything honest. I told myself biohazard labels get slapped on all kinds of things so the curious will not steal. There were signs, sure. The tape looked older than the container, edges feathered like it had been peeled and pressed too many times. The padlock had new shine, but the hasp wore scratches like it had been worried at by a nervous hand. Denial is not an idea with me. It is a reflex. I backed under it, took the weight, clicked the kingpin home, and told the empty air that I accepted. The empty air answered with silence that felt like a signature. The knocks began after I cleared the fence and let the runway fall behind me. At first, I thought tires had found a seam in the road, a rhythm born of miles. Then the tapping came when the asphalt went clean, when the lane smoothed out, when the wind forgot to move. 3 knocks in a row, a pause, 3 again. The reefer units cycled high, then low in a pattern that did not match ambient temperature. My onboard sensor logged a minor drift of 2 degrees, then back 2 degrees, then back like something inside inhaled and decided otherwise. That is not how steel breathes. I brought the CB to life just to hear someone else argue with weather. 19 was quiet. 17 coughed. A private frequency I keep for myself stayed clean like a glass nobody uses. Then a voice, easy as a neighbor, bled through on my private channel and asked, "Is it still quiet back there, driver?" Question spoken like it had been asked before tonight. I did not answer. I turned the squelch and listened for trucks, but the highway wore distance like a cloak and gave up nothing but the hiss that tells you the night is real. If you have ever told yourself that your rig is only steel and circuits, you know what it feels like when the steel begins to listen back. The knocks set themselves to my pulse until I could not tell which led and which followed. I held my breath to break the pattern. The taps stalled, then returned in a slower cadence, like a heart lowering itself onto a bed. You might say I imagined it. I might have said that too if the recording app on my phone had not turned those 3 perfect knocks to silence on playback. Nothing but air where sound had been, like the trailer did not want witnesses. The GPS drew a line west, and then revised it, and then revised it again, rabbiting ahead of me like a friend with better ideas. The destination address from Kovac Transference Logistics changed from street to coordinates to no-name road, and then blinked to a blank field before settling on a new route that traced old riverbeds like it had been taught by floodwater. Out the mirror, I caught a low shape on the horizon, a black pickup with no plates and a matte finish that turned the night into its own costume. I saw it once north of Barstow. I saw it again near Kramer Junction. It kept a distance that could be courtesy. On the CB, the same neighbor voice came back with a smile in it that I could not place. Is it still quiet back there, like repeating a joke to see if I would laugh? I tapped the mic and answered stupidly honest. No, I said, and my voice in the cab bent the air a little. Immediately, the reefer coughed down 2 degrees, as if purring, and then the knocks spaced out farther apart, patient, like a doctor counting your respirations while pretending to check the clock. If you have ever admitted a small truth to a machine and had it reply by changing the weather inside your life, you know the feeling that sat me up an inch taller. The fog thickened in the low spots. Mile markers came like metronome clicks, then failed at their job and showed me a round number I do not like. 0. Mile 0, standing where it should not stand, white on green, clean and obvious. Then another mile 0 5 minutes later, like the highway reused ideas to save time. The radio said nothing human. My phone said a tower without bars. The reefer settled into a slow hum that felt like someone asleep on my shoulder. I drove until the dark began to feel like a conversation with a person who keeps asking the same question, soft, again. At a turnout near a ghosted way station, I caved to the part of me that wanted witnesses. The booths stood as glass boxes with the blinds yanked halfway down and old fluorescent tubes gray as fish bellies. My headlights made panes out of everything. I rolled in slow. The scale numbers were dead. The office door hung open an inch, and fog pressed its face to the crack like a kid with a secret. The knocks stopped when my tires hit the pad, as if the station had told the box to mind its manners. That should have made me happy. It did not. I got out. The night curled around my ankles like cold cats. The trailer door wore tape that felt like brittle skin under my glove, and a lock that warmed to my touch as if it had waited for blood. I walked to the booth and peered in. The interior glass was fogged over, not with breath from the parking lot side. From the inside, a smear ran down where someone had drawn a finger to write letters only they needed to read. The word might have been here. It might have been help. The difference between those is not nothing. I stood with the key in my palm and made the kind of math men make when their pride uses their daughter's name. If I rejected the load, the Kovac money dissolved and the hospital portal stayed red. If I cut the tape and opened a box with a biohazard symbol, I might invite in a thing no paperwork could understand. The knocks resumed, 3 in a row, and when they hit, the steel the sound carried a little sympathy, like the person on the other side wanted me to get it right this time. Choice is a door that rarely opens again. I unlocked the lock. The moment the shackle fell away, the knocks stopped. The reefer clicked down to a hush. The fog pulled back an inch like an audience settling in. I peeled the tape that had been applied in overlapping strips, some older than others, and the smells that crawled out were the normal sort. Cold metal, factory air, a paper smell like a hobby store in winter. I braced my shoulder and lifted. The door came up steady and slow, as if the space inside pushed back not with weight, but with the idea of weight. The light mounted to the ceiling flickered alive in a weak, bluish way. The cargo bay sat empty. Frost patterned the floor plates in lace like the first flowers of winter. A child's drawing was taped to the far wall with scotch tape that had taken a stain from fingers. Crayon colors loud under cold light. A figure of a truck, square and smiling. A big person with a beard and a hat next to it. labeled Dad in handwriting that still had its training wheels on. A smaller person holding the big one's hand. The son in the corner too, close to the people's heads. I heard myself laugh once because my body believed for one stupid second that I had hallucinated every sound, that guilt wears costumes and I had met one of mine. I took a photo with my phone because proof is a superstition we trust. As I framed it, the reefer unit hiccuped just once, and the frost on the floor collapsed into water that ran toward my boots and froze again in a shallow meniscus. I stepped back. In the time it took to move, the drawing changed. The same two figures standing next to the same cheerful truck. But the small hand that had held the big one no longer grasped air. It grabbed something black and spined, a shape like a sea urchin wearing a crown of hooks, drawn by a child who had never seen one in the world but knew its silhouette from a dream. I did not move close. I did not turn away. I let the shape teach me what it pretended to be. The figure with the hat now had a mouth drawn too wide, a smile that forced itself. The sun had been scribbled over in blue. I stepped down from the bay like a man leaving a church after a sermon he had not wanted to hear. I pulled the door with more force than needed. The seal met the frame, soft and final. The lock slid home in a little sigh like a sleeper exhaling. Somewhere far away, a bird decided to try a call and then thought better of it. I climbed into the cab and called dispatch with a professionalism I respect in others. The office line clicked, and a man answered in that bored graveyard shift tone. "Morales," I said, "I am declaring a refusal." The response was an apology wearing confusion. "We do not have you on the board," he said. "You were never assigned anything tonight." I checked my email inbox. The Kovac instructions sat there without a sender address, a ghost of a message you cannot reply to. The GPS drew a spiral and then drew a line that ended in fog. The closest familiar thing I could find in the world was the CB mic, so my hand found it and made a fist around something that would not help. Knock, not from the trailer, from a sleeper behind me. One knock, deliberate and bored. Then 3 in clean time with my pulse, as if my chest had been translated into a map and something wanted to take the scenic route. I did not turn around for 2 breaths, because men like me believe in not giving the dark what it asks for. I turned around anyway. The bunk lay neat because I keep it that way, a thin blanket folded tight, the little shelf with my daughter's backpack, keychain hanging from a hook, a smiling whale with one chipped eye. Air moved in a slow animal pattern, rising and falling, the kind of motion you see on a field when wind learns patience. If you have ever listened and heard breathing where nobody is practicing it, you know the way your blood chooses your feet for a minute and leaves every other part of you to figure it out. I reached out because I'm the kind of fool who touches ovens. My hand met air that was not empty, the mild resistance of warm breath forming a shape without skin. I pulled back and smelled clean laundry in hospital corridors and the strange sweetness of a freezer that has been unplugged and plugged back in. A voice came. It used my daughter's voice with a softness I had not earned. "Stop," she said. "Please stop. I'm not going to tip you into gore. That is not what this is. I will tell you a clean version because that is what the road deserves." Years ago, on a night, I tell myself I did not have a choice. I took a sealed load for a company with a name I cannot say now without hearing air move in my sleeper. I drove a short hop while my daughter slept in a friend's house because I believed tonight's money would fix tomorrow's problem. I took an exit too fast because the map told me short is better. The headlights wrote a piece of bad fiction across a guardrail. The phone sang a song I have never deleted. I told myself later that grief is a private sport. The voice in the sleeper knew the notes of that song. "You carried me once before," it said, and the reefer unit answered with a whine like a replying choir. The black pickup I had been pretending was nothing rolled up the on-ramp and parked behind me far enough away to not be a threat, but close enough to be a problem. The windows were tinted in that commercial way that pretends the vehicle is a thought, not an object. The knock moved. It sounded in the door panel, the dash, the glove box, the trailer frame, the floor, the windshield. Everywhere at once. Not loud. Constant. The rhythm of a heart that has accepted a job and is doing it well. I put the rig in gear because motion is the oldest answer I know. The GPS blanked and showed a crosshair at the center of a white field. The map labels fell away like leaves and left a grid, which then slid into fog. The mile markers returned to their party trick and displayed 0 in the way a clock sometimes does when the power has just come back. If you have ever tried to outrun a feeling, you know how the highway sometimes helps by removing all the places you might accidentally find peace. The knocks learned my accelerations. They anticipated my foot. They matched the swell and ebb of the engine so perfectly it felt like we were sharing a cardiovascular system. I keyed the CB and begged for noise, any noise, and the speakers gave me my own voice back, tinny, sure, asking if it was still quiet back there like a man who wants to be told he is not alone. I shut the radio off, and the speaker politely kept working. I hit it with the heel of my hand, and it turned into a metronome of my pulse, knocking, until the cab felt like a stethoscope. A green sign appeared where no exit should be. Service road. No name. Arrow to the right. The fog concentrated to a wall like breath against glass. The knocks came faster and then settled into a slow pace like a nurse counting for you. I took the exit because the highway had begun to feel circular, and a man must pretend choices exist in order to continue driving, even when the road rearranges itself to keep the trick going. The service road ran straight as a ruler into a place the map did not own. I stopped in the middle of nothing with the black pickup holding its distance like a dog that understands leashes. The trailer hissed in the cold, and the reefer whispered heat into its own belly with the vanity only machines can pull off. I got out because fear can be argued with if you make a person. The fog here did not drift. It held a clean stillness like a breath you take before you say something large. I walked back to the doors and laid both hands to steel that felt like skin under snow. I told the thing the truth. I said I did not know what it was. I said this company used me. I said I would not carry it for them a second longer. The knocks softened until they were a tickle at the edge of perception. Inside the trailer, I heard paper shift, the sound of scotch tape lifting and settling. I cracked the door an inch because sometimes understanding steals a man, even when his survival would prefer he behave. Frost smoke poured out white as milk and then fell like hair. The drawing had changed again. This time the big figure had no hat. The face had a soft beard like mine. The small figure did not hold the spine thing. She held my hand again, but our arms were longer and thinner, like a child's exaggeration of distance. The truck in the picture had no wheels, drawn like a boat. Water lines rose under the tires. Someone had added a word in wobbly letters at the top. Keep. I laughed and then cried because bodies relish mixed messages. I slammed the door and locked it on the reflex that belongs to a different species. My phone lit with a new email from no one. The subject line said proof of delivery. The body held a manifest with my name, replaced by Unit 734. Containment successful. The black pickup flashed its headlights once in polite applause. My cab filled with a smell that does not live anywhere you can buy it. Rubber at the edge of heat. Men from a hospital hallway. The rain coins scent of air right before it decides to remember lightning. Something sat down on the sleeper behind me. The mattress made the small sound a person makes when they decide to accept a seat. I did not turn around because I knew what shape I would see even if I saw nothing. The breathing lined up with mine until I lost the thread of who was teaching who. If you have ever been in a room with a grief so clean it could be bottled, you know the way your body wants to be helpful, to bend, to carry, to strap down and roll. The voice spoke, and it did not borrow my daughter's mouth this time. It used mine. Drive, it said. The word felt like an instruction and a kindness. I drove. The service road unwound like ribbon, and the fog kindly stepped aside just enough to let 2 lanes breathe. Knocking from every surface wove itself into the engine note until the whole rig felt like a heart dragging a body. I do not remember where the road ended because the point here is it did not for me, not that night. There was a place where the map admitted blank. There was a place where the black pickup eased to a stop and allowed me to pass, as if handing off a baton at the end of a relay. Days later, they found the rig idling on that service road that does not appear on any map. That is what the patrol report says. The driver's seat sat empty. The CB mic swung on its curly cord and tapped the dash with a friendly metronome. The manifest lay on the passenger seat with my name above a line drawn through it and Unit 734 printed calmly below. Containment successful, the box said in a font that has only ever told the truth to computers. They opened the trailer because of course they did. Fresh dents pushed out from the inside in shallow round shapes like hands testing a door they already knew would not open today. If you ever run nights and the reefer hum learns your name, if you pick up from a place that has given up on pretending to be in use, if a company with a quiet logo offers enough to make bills blush, I am not here to preach. I would only say this. When you hear a knock that matches your pulse, you can answer and admit you do not know who is asking. If you answer, it might stop. It might not. If you ignore it, the sound learns other ways to ring. It will choose your dashboard or your dreams. It will choose the voice of the person you love most, because that is how sound finds doors. Sometimes I think the reefer units of this country are better confessionals than churches. They keep their secrets cold, and cold keeps shape. I carried a thing I once pretended could not be carried. I carried it again when I should have known better. The part that matters is that a knock came that was not a threat, but a promise. If you listen closely at some remote way station with windows fogged from the inside, you might hear it. One knock, then 3, then the soft, resuming hum of refrigeration, as if someone has finally closed a drawer that did not want to be left open 1 second longer. Some stories end when the headlights die, but others keep idling in the dark long after the key turns. If you've stayed with me this far, through haunted highways, missing way stations, unlisted CB channels, ghost diners, and freight that remembers your heartbeat, then you already know the road doesn't really end. It just changes what it asked from you. These stories weren't just about the trucks or the night. They were about what follows us when we refuse to stop, about how silence learns our names. Maybe the highway isn't haunted by ghosts at all. Maybe it's haunted by drivers who can't forgive themselves enough to rest. So the next time you see fog lifting off the asphalt at 3 a.m., or your CB crackles with a voice that sounds just a little too familiar, don't answer right away. Listen first. It might be one of us still trying to find the next mile. Thanks for riding along tonight on Whispering Abyss. If any of these stories kept you awake or made you check your mirrors twice, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which one followed you the longest after the lights went out. Until next time, keep the tires warm, the coffee hot, and remember, sometimes the quietest routes carry the loudest memories. Good night, drivers, and keep one ear on the hum, because the road is never really empty.